In this video, we'll talk about various tips and tricks and functionality in Solid Edge that you should be using when dealing with large assemblies as well as large drafts or drawings. So first, in the Solid Edge README file that comes pre-installed with Solid Edge, and this is the path, just FYI, in C, program file, Siemens, Solid Edge 2024, it's called readme.htm. So this README document has tons of useful information in case you've never seen it. But here near the top, you'll see the recommended system configuration, which is basically talking about hardware, operating system, things like that. And you'll notice it actually recommends 32 gigabytes of RAM or more. So it's pretty common nowadays actually to see even 64 or more gigs of RAM. And that'll give you the best performance when you're dealing with larger models. Another very important factor for performance is the video card or the graphics card. And it's recommended to have a video graphics card with at least 2 gigs of memory for itself. Again, this is completely separate from your actual machine's RAM that we already talked about. So it's common nowadays to have graphics cards with 4, 6, 8, even 12 gigs of memory. And again, that really improves your performance with complicated models inside of Solid Edge. A bit further down, there's a few other things here in the display system requirements and information section. This talks about the hardware and software certifications website, and that's basically an Excel document that the Solid Edge team maintains, and it's not exclusive or exhaustive. So if your machine or graphics card isn't on that list, it doesn't mean that Solid Edge won't work, right? These are just some of the more common and more powerful graphics cards and machines that they are testing. So just keep that in mind. It's a good reference if you want to take a look at that if you're thinking about upgrading. And one last thing here, if you want to try this virtual memory page file size setting, that's another recommendation that they have in there. With that, let's jump into Solid Edge and look at a few things. Now, in your main Solid Edge options, under the Assembly Open As, you'll see many settings here, and you can customize this per user, right? Some people that may be working with smaller assemblies versus other users that may be working with larger assemblies. You can have different settings, of course. And what this lets you do is designate what you want to classify as a small, medium, or large assembly. So in this case, the default, a small is anything with under 50 unique components, and a large assembly will be anything with above 1,000 unique components, right? And for a large assembly, for example, what's being done is it's inactivating all of the parts, and there's actually been quite a bit of improvements to the functionality of Solid Edge with this. And honestly, I would recommend even for your medium, medium they're inactive, but even for your small assemblies, give it a shot. Right, and again, we're talking about performance improvements, so all of this is really only applicable if you're having any lag or performance issues when you're zooming in and out of your model and you're dynamically rotating and things like that. So even with your small assemblies, you can try inactivating all of your parts, because the last several versions of Solid Edge, they've done a great job, and you can actually do a lot of your modeling commands with parts being inactive. So what that means is they're not fully loaded in memory. So again, it just gives you performance improvements. And beyond that, any command that does require a part to be active, it'll just activate it for you automatically in the background. And worst case, it will prompt you if it can do it automatically. But give that a shot. They've made some improvements these last couple of versions of Solid Edge. Now, two other things down here is the assembly preview mode. So I'll show you that in just a minute. So that's the default option if for large assemblies, again, based on this value here that you set, you can choose that to open by default, but you can also override it, as I'll show you shortly. And lastly, the large assembly performance mode. That command came out several versions ago, but it's gotten much better over the last few years, of course. And again, this is a default setting where you can have it turn on, or it'll actually prompt you once your assembly reaches 5,000. And this applies if you are trying to open a model with above 5,000 parts, or even as you're modeling, if you if you're at 4,999 and you create a new part, or you create a pattern or something, for example, as soon as you go above 5,000, it will prompt you to turn on large assembly performance mode. And just FYI, what that does is on the view tab, you'll see all of the settings here with a star or asterisk. That is what the large assembly performance mode is modifying for you. And you'll see that at the bottom here, it tells you this is what's being disabled when using large assembly mode. Okay, so let's close out of the solid edge options and look at the large assembly. So in the file open dialog, when you go to, let's go to a large assembly here. And this is where you can pick some of those options that I just talked about. So the assembly open as, here you can choose to auto select based on the number of parts. So by default, again, recall it was 50 parts for a small, or a large assembly is anything above 1,000, and medium, of course, is in between. So auto select just looks at the number of parts, or you can override small, medium, or large settings, or you can just open it however it was last saved. So you always have full control when you're opening assemblies here. And here's that newer setting, the assembly preview mode. So I'm going to leave that on and show you what that does here. And just FYI, you also have access to use specific configurations or zones at this point when you're first opening up a model. Again, that would be a huge time saver if you drill down to a specific configuration or zone, so it's not opening the entire assembly. But I'm just going to open the entire model just so you can see what that preview mode does. And again, this assembly has, let's actually open the assembly statistics here. But wait, notice it actually tells you your assembly now exceeds the size, again, that 5,000 value, so you can change it if you want. So it's recommending you turn on large assembly performance mode. So you can turn it on if you want or not. And you can always toggle that on and off here. And you'll notice this ribbon bar is actually shortened. That's what this preview mode is, and that's what this indicator window is telling you here. You can close this window and reopen it with this icon here at any point. All right, so a couple other things I wanted to mention are zones and configurations. So at this point, even in this preview mode, which as you'll notice lets you do things like measurements, reports, assembly statistics. So this is great for somebody, maybe a manager, or somebody doing some reviewing, things like that. Right, so zones is something that you should be using. It's very similar to configurations in case you are using those, but zones lets you do it more graphically or spatially, right, in the actual model space, if you will. So you'll notice one has already been created here. So if I show the zone box, you can edit the zone box, by the way. You'll see it pop up there. And what I'm going to do at this point is switch to a configuration. All right, so in this floor layout configuration, which is just a smaller area, that's everything else is hidden besides these parts of the floor layout. I further have a zone of just the holding tanks, and again, you can of course modify the size and the area of this zone. Right, with edit definition, you can change the box, you can show and hide it. And at this point, what you may want to do when you're after you've created your zone, you would want to do show components or show only. Show only will basically hide everything else that's not fully inside your zone. All right, so again, this is another tool, again, similar to configurations in case you have experience with that, but similar idea. You're just showing and hiding parts to let you work with smaller regions of your assembly to give you better performance. Now let's hide that zone box and look at a couple other things here. So let's go back to the floor layout configuration, and you'll see some of these sub-assemblies look a little strange, right? These look like just simple boxes, but if you hover over them, you see they have a lot more detail. And this is what's called simplified assemblies, and it's applicable to parts as well. So you can simplify parts and assemblies. And to do that, actually, we do need to open this part. So let me click on this part. Well, you know what? Let's open up the assembly preview window, and let me mention a couple of things here. So the edit assembly with options, brings you to this window, which we've already seen a few times, right? So you can choose to inactivate parts, use simplified version, etc., etc. I'm just going to edit the assembly, and what that does is it just opens this assembly fully, well, based on the settings that you're currently using anyway. So you can see in the bottom left, this has been around for a couple of versions now, but this is a slightly different interface, if you will, or dialog that pops up here, which shows you the progress of all of the parts and some sub-assemblies that it's loading up. So here you can see the benefit of using all these tools that I'm talking about, right? So notice it's taking a few seconds here because I'm basically fully loading the assembly. So once I have this assembly open, and if I right click on the sub-assembly, you'll notice under the simplified adjustable, this is where you can designate if you want to use the simplified assembly, which is currently done, or the designed assembly. So if I switch to designed assembly, notice what's happening. It's basically loading up all of the actual designed parts, and you can see a big difference, right? This is the actual realistic or designed representation of that subassembly. So if I want to dig into that here, just to show you very quickly, again, this is a great functionality in Solid Edge that you should really be using in case you have not. So here you can see the simplified assembly, and where you access that, by the way, is on the Tools tab. So if we switch to the simplified environment, I can actually just edit the existing simplified assembly representation that I already had. And I'm not going to go through all the commands, of course, but just notice that there's an auto simplify tool, there's an enclosure tool, and many other modeling commands. But the idea is we've simplified this very complex subassembly into a few blocks. Right, you can see just a few enclosures and a few more down here for the feet in case we need those for placement in our top level assembly. Right, so this is what really gives you much better performance with your larger assemblies. So let's close out of that. And there's a couple more tools that I want to mention here for your larger assemblies. First is the select parts by size option. So on the home tab, you'll see this command right here, select parts by size. And in case you've never seen this, it's a very handy tool for hiding your smaller parts. So you can choose which direction you want to go. The default is, of course, from smaller to larger. And you basically start pressing this next button, and it starts incrementing up and selecting for you all of your smaller parts. So you can see them as I zoom in, all of these small bolts, nuts, washers, right? Hardware type parts, and in general just these smaller parts in your assembly. Once you're satisfied there, you can accept, and what that does is it selects all of those parts for you. You can see 1,500 parts have been selected, and at this point I can hide them, right, and from here create a configuration or whatever else you might need to do. But again, a great little tool there to help you with your smaller parts. And similarly, identical parts. So if I click on one of these tanks, for example, there's a couple commands here. You can select the parts that it's constrained to or assembled to. You can select all of the identical parts in that subassembly that it's in, or you can select all parts across all other subassemblies. So there you can see it's instantly selected all of the other tanks, identical tanks there. And again, I can hide at this point or do whatever else I might need to do. One final thing here in the assembly is the sharpness value. So right now it's actually grayed out because large assembly performance mode is controlling that. But if you don't have large assembly mode on, then here's where you can change that sharpness value. And it just gives you improved performance, right? Your circles will look more hexagonal, if you will, while you're zooming and rotating, again, just to give you better performance. So that's a toggle that you can control as well. All right, with that, let's jump into some tips and tricks on drafting. So if I switch over to a draft here and go to the options, the main Solid Edge options, on the General tab, you'll see this setting actually came out several years ago. And what this does is it enables multiple cores, but it's really 2 cores in the background by default. So there's actually a registry key that you can create in your registry. You may or may not need IT's help to do this, But if you search for solid edge draft cores on the Siemens support website, you'll find this article, and it's very simple. It just tells you the exact location, so current users, software Siemens, solid edge, whichever version, debug. In the debug folder, you'll create this key. And it's the D word 32-bit type, and you'll type in the value, which is your physical core. So if you have a 4-core machine, you could set that to 4, and that would increase the cores available for drawing view processing from 2 to 4. So that should give you some improved performance there when you're dealing with very complicated drawing files. All right, so let's close out of that, and what we'll do next is open up a draft file and look at a couple other things. So with a draft file selected in the File Open dialog, you'll see this choice here. So instead of opening it with all of the drawing views activated, you can actually go into a review mode where the drawing views are inactive. So let's take a look at what that does. You'll see some of these commands are disabled, right? So creating new views and some of the table commands are disabled. But this is a great tool for, again, a manager or somebody doing some reviewing, approvals. You can still create dimensions. You can print, for example. So many things you can do without fully loading all of the drawing views, right? Again, this is applicable when you're dealing with very complex drawings that take, 10, 20, 30 seconds, even a minute to open and work with. This is a great tool that you can use to work with those drawings much better. And on the Tools tab is where you can switch that back and forth at any point. So you can switch to activate them or the opposite, to inactivate them. Okay, let's switch to an assembly here, and let's say you were going to create a new drawing here. And I'm going to run the drawing view creation wizard. And this is a very important step here. When you open up the drawing view wizard options, there's this create draft quality drawing views that you can enable at this point. And you can choose between 1, 2, and 3. You can choose to activate the parts for dimensioning or not. And what that does is it creates a more lightweight drawing view, right? Because while you're working with a drawing, you don't need to have it fully loaded with every single fine detail. So what this lets you do is have much better performance. At any point, if you do need to switch to the high quality view, it's a simple right click. You can right click and access convert to high quality view, right? And by the way, in the properties under the advanced tab, you'll see that you can actually change that 1, 2, or 3 value for that draft quality view. And the final thing I wanted to mention is your save settings. So hopefully you're using save settings all around Solid Edge. There are many commands, for example, when you're creating holes or other procedural features, you can use save settings to basically pre-populate all of the values for many commands. So in drafts, you can do a similar thing. So under the, let's go to the view wizard, for example, and you'll notice here's the save settings. So depending on your parts, sheet metal parts, or even assemblies, you can have many pre-saved settings to create your drawing views. And you can actually even take this a step further and save these as default. So in your Solid Edge options, under the Drawing View Wizard tab, you'll see some values similar to what we saw before, which with the Assembly Open as settings. So your small, medium, and large assembly drawing views, you can set those values. Here you can set your pre-saved settings for your part views and your sheet metal views, and if you want dynamic display on or off for those. And down here you'll see the save settings for your assembly views. So for small, medium, and large assemblies, you can have those save settings. For example, if you want to hide hidden lines and tangent lines and all those other settings that you may be modifying after the fact, you can have those pre-saved. And similarly for your parts list and family of assemblies parts list as well. So again, what I'm talking about there is very quickly, if you're finding yourself going to your properties and changing a lot of these views, you can save a lot of these settings, you can save these to your save settings. All right, that's about all I had to cover on these topics for improving performance with your large assemblies and drafts. So feel free to add any comments, questions, concerns. If you have any questions, and if you have any suggestions for any other topics you'd like us to cover. Thanks for watching, and take care.